Hi,
Hi,
Julian.
hello.
How are you?
Fine.
Long time no see.
I know.
You
What
look
a fun.
healthy.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Very good. Is it nighttime there, or is it just dark outside?
Well, it's my daughter has gone to university,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm using her room, which is a north-facing room, but it is actually quite dark. It'll be dawn soon.
Is it cold over there? Is it like nearly
It's
winter now?
getting there. It's not too bad actually.
Okay.
It's quite nice weather actually.
Very nice for cycling, right?
Yeah. A little bit, not for much longer.
How's
I-
everybody? How's all the families at East?
Yeah, pretty good. We're sort of struggling with everyone else
Hmm.
because of all the situation going on. But yeah, it's actually okay. There's quite a lot to do. Some
Yeah, that's
interesting
good.
projects, I think.
That's brilliant.
I realise that I'm in a kind of silhouette here
Hmm.
with the light. Maybe it's okay. It'll get better. Can you see me okay?
Yeah, I can see your.
Anyway,
Yeah.
cool. And how's everyone here? Are you all okay?
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Here, nearly all of them, like 80-90% of the students are from China, and they are still in China.
Yes.
So many of them haven't traveled to Korea
Yeah.
due to the situation. And since the university is ongoing with online system,
Yeah.
so there was no need to actually travel all the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
So these events are important because this is a way to get to see and talk to each other, at least. Yeah.
So yeah, that's how it's going. And because as you have seen it on Instagram and all the chatting boxes I have spread the words that you're talking. So there will be people outside of the university as well who can come into this lecture.
Yeah.
So there will be, but it's still working hours. So some professional people might come in and go as their time allows.
Yeah. And you're recording it, or yes, you are.
Yes, I am recording it, and we are hoping to have this on the website of our graduate university school, on the website heading to show and share what we're doing.
It's a shame not to have been able. Yeah, no, I'm really pleased you asked, and it would have been very nice to come and see you there.
Yes. Oh yes, desperately.
Never mind. This is good. So we've got an hour, haven't we?
Yes, you've got an hour.
And so I've got quite a lot of slides to talk to, and I'm kind of looking forward to talking to them.
Okay.
And so if I run out of time, just tell me.
Okay. Well, I think we are quite flexible, between 1 hour and 90 minutes. So yeah.
Okay.
I'll start with the introduction.
Okay.
Okay, so welcome everybody. Welcome to the Kookmin University, the Graduate School of Techno Design. Welcome everyone, and thanks for coming in. Very good to see you all looking very healthy, and I guess this is how we greet people these days. So this global online lecture series course is founded by myself and Professor Chung Mi-sun in Interior and Furniture Design Lab to take advantage of our frequent use of online class system these days, and to provide maximum efficiency in delivering various and wide spectrum of knowledges and wisdom to our graduate school students. Especially, in fact, 90% of our students at the Graduate School of Techno Design are from abroad. We are very happy to import global lectures into the core of the master's course. This lecture series will not last 3 hours. We aim to wrap up in 1 hour and 30 minutes. And for the question and answer, I will be collecting questions from students over the email, and answers will be shared from Julian over the email as well. So let me first introduce today's lecturer, Professor Julian Lewis. So Julian, hello, is an
Hello.
honorary professor at the University of Nottingham, Department of Architecture and Built Environment. But more importantly, Julian is the director at the very well-known office called East Architecture, Landscape and Urban Design. Julian in East Architecture works on extensive experience of developing ideas, design and research, as well as implementation on a wide range of building, landscape and urban projects. The project spectrum is rather wide and hence very interesting. And Julian is interested in how place influence architecture and the design public realm and what role architecture can have in cities. So please welcome with applause, Professor Julian Lewis.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minsun, for that really great introduction. I'm now going to try and do something very complicated, which is to share my screen. I really hope I can do it. Yeah, I think it could work. It's going to work. Very good.
It is working. Brilliant.
And you can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So, as Minsun said, I am director of East, along with my two co-directors, and we're about 18 people, and we're in London. And what I am going to talk about is I've got a number of projects I'm going to go through. But what I'm going to try and do is to address this notion of indeterminacy, and I suppose into which I read the notion of openness of the city. And I think it's a nice theme that has been set. And many of our projects look at that. And so when I speak about these projects, I'm going to try to address them in this way. This is our office space in London Fields, where we made this pink concrete floor, which is still doing quite well. And we've just started going back to the office now, actually, in the COVID time. We do work across London. We work in other places too. And this plan is a way of saying what a project can look like, because every line is a project. So sometimes we work on roads or housing or public spaces or community buildings. And the reason for saying that, I suppose, is because I think architecture is so important that it should be shared, and people should be able to address the city in all of its complexity, not just buildings on a separate site. We started early on in the practice. We tried to look at the city as a shared city and a shared context. And one way of looking at this was a project we became involved in early on in Borough High Street. And it was a public realm project, and we didn't quite know what to do because the brief was very open. And one thing we did was that we took the drawings of other people and we stuck them together to make a kind of situation that was either existing or underway. It was happening. And in this way, we could construct a kind of dynamic picture of the condition we were entering into. The project, I won't show too many slides, but the project was interesting in the sense that it made us realize that there are two basic dimensions to public spaces. There's the stuff that you see, and then there's the stuff that you don't see or not notice so much. So this one was something that we wanted people to see. It was a big tipped up tray of flowers, and it would be a shelter. And then the stuff that you didn't see would be all those things that you walk on, all those materials which are tailored together in the public realm, often in the ground, but not always just in the ground. And we took some pleasure in looking at the very mundane elements of the public realm and naming streets because those were historically important and beginning to kind of splice into the existing city. So this was about something that was not all about newness, It was really trying to engage with a condition that was already vibrant, needed help, needed adjustment. In this case, the granite helps people feel a bit safer from the cars. But the shared life of the city here, of course, means that sometimes people just not really looking at your design, they're just walking on it or going past it. And we kind of enjoyed that because it's a bit difficult sometimes to think that all of that design that you're creating might not be noticed. But of course it does get noticed. It's just, it might be subconsciously. Things like traffic lights becoming sculpturally powerful when they're being located was a lesson for us, because we realized that design was often about locating, not always about creating new things. And we took photographs, and we just began to get a sense of our relationship with the city with this project. That's why I'm showing a few introductory slides. It was kind of 25 years ago. It's still there in some parts, a bit like this. And I'm showing this slide because we went back to take some photographs of the place and enjoyed the juxtaposition of utility covers, the terrazzo map that named the place that has changed over the years, and the little cover. And it was about us understanding that there is a busy world of different determinants of utility cover goes there because the services are under the pavement. The map goes there because we like the idea of naming places. The water point there has to do with another line. And then the black bricks are there to be able to lift up easily. So although it looks like the sort of thing you would ignore or miss, it's actually very instrumental spatially, I think, because the spaces between these things are not decided upon, they arise. And that's a situation that we're involved in. And this proximity diagram, in a way, takes on this idea of these juxtapositions of the city, and working, playing, living means you have to create spaces for those. And on a bigger scale, London is made of these shapes, which we decided to name a bit more carefully. So there are valleys, chases, forests, plains, hills and river spaces, which if you draw them in this way, makes you start to think about the shape of the places around you. And another way over the years we've asked people to think about places is in their memory. If you think about where you grew up and you imagine drawing that, and you imagine drawing it until your memory runs out, you would get a drawing a bit like this if you drew it 2 or 3 times. You kind of have to do it a few times because this is a very nice version. It's not that easy to do it like this.
I
But it
actually
can
have
be done.
this similar exercises with,
Aha.
like first years, not in the graduate school, but in the first years of the bachelor's. And it's quite
Right.
interesting, but
Yeah.
no one can actually draw like this extent, quite
I
large
know.
extent.
Yeah. She had a good memory. In Scrubs Lane, another project more recently, this is a photograph by a photographer called Jason Orton, and I'm showing it because, again, it shows components of the city that are amazing in juxtaposition. So it's a community space, it's a natural environment to some extent, it's a Victorian structure, there's a canal that was also a 19th century route, and together it makes this incredible situation which we tried to draw in various ways quite quickly and almost feverishly in order to understand some spaces and buildings. And our job here was to try to steer development. And when you steer development in a place like this, where a cemetery is next to some Victorian industrial buildings, and then there's some new housing beyond, it's a bit like a dream, and in a way it gives you license to feel free to take care, but to kind of immerse yourself in this kind of situation. This was the kind of plan that evolved, and one thing here was that because there was some height, to the buildings. We thought, well, okay, if some buildings have to be tall, that's okay. But maybe whenever they have to be tall, they must bring along a piece of public space that connects the cemetery to the spaces on the other side. So we kind of insisted in this case that the mix of the city would be brought together through public spaces that the taller buildings could help pay for. And this image, in a way, recalls this early photograph, the first photograph I just showed you, in the sense that what we're showing here is partly propositional, these buildings. I don't know if you can you see my cursor when I do that? Yeah. But partly existing. The river, the canal is here, the bridge is here, we paint it, new steps. So again, there's this blend of old and new that makes this space, which you would never design a space like this, quite like this. So it's important to sort of remember that much of what we're designing is already there. Part of part of the approach of designing is often to kind of take on what's already there and to rework it. And in this project in Bermondsey Square, which was a public space, a market space, we made a model of the ground which we wanted to use, which has these buttons in it. And that was about responding to the market. What they sold on the market was things like this. And we thought that these could be the kind of trinkets that stopped cars driving in there and would feel like the market, but at the same time there would be this corduroy-like bays which would run through the scheme and beyond the buildings and across the road. These are two studies just looking at what that would look like, so that the buildings were not having a little landscape in the middle, but this ground was like a stretched out sheet that went beyond. And then in this sheet there was this idea that you could have the bollards, but maybe, yeah, all sorts of ideas. This is, again, one of those drawings where you just want to put everything in there. Not all of these things happened, but in drawing this, it was possible to then move forward to a plan that simply had clusters of these bollards here, these trinkets, these stretchers across here. We did, in fact, encourage them to make a crossing here. And they made a nice drawing for this magazine, which sort of makes an emblematic shape, which is publicly accessible. And I think what's nice is that it works when it's open. To me, this looks like a little Bruegel painting because it's got no center. And the bollards are to do with the cars, and these are able to be used with the market or by seating. This is a bull's pitch. And then when you look out, you can bring the landscape into the space. And then these are these kind of ambiguous objects, icosahedron bollards, which we painted with an artist called John Hares. And it can be playful and it can be empty, and it can, and it's very, yeah, this was an early version where we wanted to make it, so these bricks, when you snap them, they have this little rough edge. And we wanted the whole thing to be like this. And of course that was too expensive, but it helped us to understand how much of this we wanted. And we also worked on site to test the scale of the bollards in cardboard. And so with a few simple measures, it's not, I don't like the buildings so much. They were designed by other people. But what we did do was to allow the lighting to be fixed to the buildings above the ground, and then the ground goes beyond. And in a way, there's only three elements to this scheme. It's just bollards and ground, and but it's very well used, and it's quite rich. And I think the good thing there is that it has uses on all sides of the space, and it can work when it's full up as well. And there are not that many spaces that I've found that are able to be full and empty and successful in both of those. And it's not just because of our design. I think it's partly because of the shape of the triangle. It gives you some degree of enclosure and some degree of moving through. And then they had some funny car adverts. I mean, I'm showing this because it was surprising that someone did a car advert in the space. And then Ellis Woodman showed me this, which I hadn't seen. He said nothing's new. Everything's already been invented previously. I don't know actually exactly when this was made, and I don't know exactly what it's showing, but it's an amazing image.
Is that really an original drawing?
Yeah,
From the olden
it's
days?
incredible. Yeah, they're showing these kind of platonic solids in the foreground.
Interesting.
Some mathematical reason. We've worked on a number of high street projects over the years, and high streets are fascinating places because each one has its own community, its own brief. Again, you are asked to devise your own response to a brief. It's in North East London, and a place called Waltham Forest. And it's a high street. And at the time, this was when the Olympics were coming, the Olympic Games and the parklands were coming. So this was an attempt to try to bring this up to scratch. And we made a drawing then. You can see the high street in the orange spots. So the high street is there on the right, running up. And then all the Olympics were to the west. And so the idea was to connect through the green spaces and over a bridge into the Olympic Park, which completely changed the geography of this place. And this drawing was trying to think about what did it mean to improve a high street? Do you do something all the way along the high street, or as we found here, it's better to do things in specific moments, not everywhere. The money only goes so far anyway. And so one thing here was we clad a bridge. It was a very noisy bridge with stainless steel panels that give a degree of reflectivity, but just allow you to peep over to the buildings beyond. These were new steps allowing you to get down to this bridge and route. And this is a view of something that's kind of, it's a nice building. It's a wide pavement and you wouldn't really look at it, but actually it was a massive difference to what was there before in terms of the width of the pavement and the building being cleaned up. And so there's a kind of word that we used at one point, decent background. This decent background is something which I think is very important when designing places. Nothing in this picture really is to look at apart from the building that was already there to look at. And so what we said was, well, let's look at that building then. It's already there, it's very good. Let's make a good ground. We don't have to put something in your face or make you notice something. Whereas here we did want to notice something. And we made some little souvenir buildings of the Olympics so that you could see the little ones close up and then the big ones far away. And unfortunately, people used this as an ashtray. So then they removed it, which I thought was unfair because actually it worked quite well as an ashtray. They should have kept it. And things like, again, a kind of civic pride in the dimension of the handrail. So these steps are leading to a fairly low grade supermarket, but I wanted to make a handrail that was as powerful as the one that goes over London Bridge, this big stainless steel section. And I think that things like that are noticed quietly and they help you to, they lead your way across to these strange landscape up and down in these backlands. And then we made another bollard. This stops a car driving onto a bridge, but it was a kind of winner's seat as well. And then we tried to encourage people to make their way towards the Olympics with some painted signs. We widened some footway. This is kind of important because we widened the bit of ground on the left with the tree used to be in the housing estate, covered in grass, where no one was using it. So we convinced the council to move the fence back and make a much wider space. This is next to the line in Quay Junction. So we made a quay. And just, again, curbs having a civic presence. And then they asked us to, now that we had managed to connect to the Olympics, they said, can you make a sign? And a few other things, but the sign was the main thing. And it's near a football stadium called Leyton Orient. And I quite liked the name Orient as a kind of way of a sign, but it seemed a bit oblique. So we just called it the name of the place in the end. It's Leyton. And I think what's nice about this sign is it illuminates at night, but it's also bird boxes, and it's related to the balancing ponds here, which are ecologically very valuable. And this was the back of Leighton, away from the high street, and now this became a frontier, a sort of a front, and that allowed us to do things like putting mirrors, and so you've got a sign, a funny handrail, all sorts of bits and pieces that add up to a general sense of welcomeness. And this is another high street in the same sort of area, in Wood Street. And we call this Wood Street Inside Out because, of course, in a high street, people are doing things inside the shops and the businesses, and you don't often see them. And we wanted to bring the project was to improve the high street, but part of that was consulting with people, and part of it was us looking at what was valuable. So we made a keep list of what we saw was valuable. And you know that sometimes people say, yeah, this architecture is of merit and this architecture is not of merit. It's ugly and this one's beautiful. We didn't want to do that. We just wanted to see what we liked, whether it was ugly or, you know, beautiful. And I think all of you would have your own opinions as to what you would judge was ugly or beautiful or worth having. And I think that's very exciting. In a way, it invests a certain degree of subjectivity in judgments of value, which I think is an important thing for an architect to do, not to be told what's valuable, but to decide and to show why. And similarly, one of the spaces that we saw in this high street was not really a space at all. It was a kind of yard, and we made an event one evening. So you can see here, this space here is not really what you'd think of as a public space, but we thought that it was an important space in the high street. And so we tried to dramatize and engage people by saying, well, in this area, Hitchcock, the filmmaker, is well known to have made a film which was lost. It's a lost film. And so the idea was that someone would project the film, they would find it. In fact, of course, they made their own film. And so the event projects his film onto the side. People like the space. You know, we had one evening and it was playful. And what that meant was that we could then celebrate people being here. And with Verity O'Keeffe, the artist, we made a list of all the people who were doing things in this high street on the side of this wall. And so this wall became more known as something that could be used and present the image of the high street. And we also consulted with local people as to what they wanted to have in their high street. And they wanted a square. I mean, we'd already made the square here, but what else could happen? And we made this balloon with a camera that went up and down to give a kind of one-to-one community consultation, a sort of game of moving things around that you wanted to happen. And we led to support for a playful little city silhouette, which lined the backs of the houses, which were on the public space. And in a way, you get this quite nice surreal juxtaposition of the playful skyline here. The older children can play over there, and the public space kind of runs through it and connects up with the high street beyond. You can see it here. So it seemed very nice to kind of have these buildings giving onto these buildings, and this space happens here. And you often get the situation with fences and boundaries and edges, I think, in the public realm, where there's a security measure going on, and what it means is the edge is bad and you don't want to go near it, and that affects the whole of the feeling of the space. So if you make a good edge, then the space feels good. On another project in Hackney, Bream Street, we've been working with some other architects to design some affordable housing just here on the corner and a public realm in this site. And this drawing was to try to take on the character of the place, looking in detail at some of the things that gave a feeling of what this could be like. And that had to do with the canal, the industrial equipment, the materials were kind of poured concretes, granites, tarmacs, little bollards to fix your boat to, willow trees. So it was good to look carefully in order to understand that actually maybe we could make a big new route through connecting this street to the water. And the building here is next to a salmon fish factory. And so somehow this building had to work hard on all sides. And so we said that on this side, it kind of dents in and out. That's the entrance and the car park. This is a little industrial unit. This is a playground. And this side is covered in salmon colored tiles to reflect the salmon fish factory. So this is, in a way, a public realm building, in the sense that it tries to be a bit like one of the warehouses on the corner, not too spectacular, but gently responding in specific ways to the conditions that surround it. Here's the salmon factory. And I think this is a balance that we try to get, that the buildings are not showing off, but they are place specific. And another project in Southwark and South London takes on a similar kind of approach, where this is the building we designed, but actually, Adam Kahn and Levitt Bernstein designed these other ones, and we worked with them to do that. But what was really important was the main street is here, and this space here is the kind of piece of ground which we wanted to, and also the courtyard, to reuse the landscape that was there before and make new routes through into the city by reusing the structures that were demolished, the old buildings, and making a landscape that felt as valuable as a Roman artifact that was discovered through digging. So, you know, just simply using the bricks again and making little celebratory structures means that you can make a linear garden that runs through as a street, a community garden. And next to it, this building, the idea here was that the building would have this sense of having a rough, granular, fine-grained, rich ground, this one. And then this upper one would be a good, decent facade. And then up here, you'd have something that was a little bit set back and more to do with the sky. And so you get this combination of this community garden using the recycled materials and this rougher ground. And then it starts to become more street-like. And then something else happens with the sky up there. So just to show that there are various ways in which the public realm and the buildings, which we are trying more and more and to design together, can have ideas which are not always quite the same, but always with the same intentions to make them work with each other. And a recent building we made, a hotel and housing block in Stratford, does this as well. So essentially it's a building here. And again, I think all of our buildings that we haven't done lots of buildings because we've done all sorts of different sorts of projects, but the buildings that we've done tend to be always working on four sides. I don't know why. There's always a kind of slack space around the edges, and we try to make use of that. So here, for example, the space here is next to 1960s flats. Here it's a kind of 1950s car park yard. And here there's a little street with a 1980s building. And here there's a huge space opposite, recreation ground. So this building has to kind of, in a way, be shaped by and help shape the space around. So there's a kind of a bit of a push and a pull. And I don't, you know, thinking of, and I know this isn't like a Giacometti sculpture, but there is a sense when you look at a Giacometti sculpture and Florian Bagel was very good at talking about this, that because it's been shaped to be tall and thin and under some pressure to be tall and thin, you feel the weight of the space around it. And yet importantly, it's not just being squashed to become small, it's also pushing a space back out again a little bit. So there's a kind of tension, and that tension has to do with the interaction of the figure and the space of the city. And I think we felt that when we were designing this building. On the ground floor, we tried as much as possible to make the ground floor connect with spaces around that were not part of the building ownership. And so this drawing was seeking to connect at all sides. And of course, in reality, it's a bit simpler than this, but we did manage to get the ground floor to work in that spirit. And this is what, this was me drawing a sketch on a bus, thinking about the relationship between one facade and another facade, thinking that maybe we could make the effect different by using the same brick but different mortar joints. And so this brick here has a kind of mortar joint that's the same color as the bricks, and it's a kind of New York thing. It's a kind of strong facade, and the sills are flat and the windows are bigger at the top for a little emphasis. And it's important these shoulders are a different height, because this one gives onto this space, and this one actually you can't see it, but relates to the street buildings here. You can just about see it there. There's this kind of urban relationship. And then this is this edge that gives onto this green space next to the 60s building. So you've got these amazing trees. So really this tree is as strong as the building. And you can see that this facade is very flat, and on the sides the sills project more, and it's a little bit more projecting. And we made these doors. This is very unspectacular, but these doors can give access to this green space, and so we felt that was a triumph, even though it may take time. Different scales, little buildings and big buildings seem to be somehow important in this. So this is like a little house sitting on the balcony to give some shelter. And I would again, there's a kind of series of references to this, that I suppose Florian was influential in that sense, Colin St. John Wilson as well. This notion of being in the city can only really be accessed when you're close to things that are of different scales, and so you sense your own scale in the city. In a way, you need to relate scale, and I think that can be done with pleasure when the scales are very different next to each other. And I think the human perception is incredibly sensitive at judging this. So I think that's an asset that architects have to work with and often abuse, because they don't understand how powerful scale is. And so judging relationships of scale, whether they're very similar or whether they're incredibly different or whether they're somewhere between, is something which I think is an enduring fascination. I'm also thinking of Hans van der Laan, who wrote a book on the architectonic nature of the plastic number. And what he was doing there was looking at the relationship between the thicknesses of walls and the spaces between. And if you look at it, it's very interesting. He talks about amounts of numbers. So, for example, you would be able to, I'm deviating here, but it was very nice. He sort of lays out, he had a game actually which would help you to do this, but you would have a handful of stones or leaves, and you would know if there's 5 or maybe 10 or 15, but you don't really know after, let's say, 12 or something, actually, because then it's just a bunch of stones or leaves. and then you can only judge whether it's 100 or 200. So he kind of set out this system of perceived proportions, a bit like a three-dimensional modular. And I think it's worth looking at. He actually goes back to Stonehenge. He thinks that Stonehenge is the perfect representation of these proportions in terms of the spaces and the thicknesses of the pillars and the spaces between them. Anyway, have a look at that. But so this, yeah, just scale, interiority, and being at the edge of another open space was the reason that we made this table. And then you have this sort of Baroque back. The back of the building flexes a little bit and enjoys this mix and very loose urban structure. These 40s buildings and the 60s buildings. David Grandords took these photos, and I think he understood very quickly what we were hoping to arrive at, which was this flexing free back, which of course no longer has to be a back, because actually you are now saying this is acceptable. And I was kind of shocked when David took this photograph with this green canopy, because even I was slightly horrified at the ugliness of this canopy. And then I thought, no, but actually I was wrong, because it's really amazing. I actually really like it. Now he's taken a photograph with such care. So looking harder, I think, is what the photograph taught me. And of course, then you get views out, which are nice. So back to another high street in Wood Green Lanes. And again, in this case, a 3-kilometre street, there's this incredible array of different things which you can do. And you can see here some lights in the trees as the bus goes past. So it's a major scheme, meaning it was one of Transport for London's big projects, where the idea was to improve the street for pedestrian and cycle use. And I think that's interesting, because what it means is that the car, which has so long dominated the experience of the road everywhere, you know, not just here, what does it mean to then say, let's try and improve the environment for people? Let's help the economy by being able to cross the road. And what other things can we do? And again, a whole range of things. And one thing was like seating. People are a bit worried about seating. They don't like people sitting down for too long because they think they'll be antisocial. And so sometimes perches is a kind of compromise. And we said, well, okay, if we're going to perch, maybe we could make these big acorns, which felt like the ancient woodland had been. I mean, there used to be an ancient woodland at Wood Green up the hill. So we imagine them rolling down the hill and stopping here. And then there are these other moments where there's a kind of widening of the street, and this library, this rather lovely 50s, yeah, 70s, not quite sure when this was built, this library, but we overclad it, we rendered it in a way that gave it this sense of hanging gardens and this lush backdrop to this space with a big sign meant that it suddenly became part of the high street. And again, with this pub building on the corner, we widened the footway by making the carriageway narrower. And we made a little pub garden by, you can just about see the piers and columns of the Victorian base is replicated in little seats and perches here, and then there's a big block here, a bit like a piece of this is being pulled out onto the corner. So again, they're stopping cars driving into people. And then another one here in the foreground has fallen over to give that sense of something in play. I think that was the feeling we wanted, not to fix it too much, because the building does that very well, but there's something at play here. Which allows you to access and feel welcome. Things like a sign, which is a fence, which is also an insect farm hotel, tells you about the new river, and it mended a vicar's fence who was very happy that we could help him make his front yard look good. So that was one of those projects where we killed 4 birds with 1 stone, I think. And we worked with the shop owners here to do with very little money to do their shop upgrades, some signs, big signs showing what they sold, and just celebrating their names, and making new canopies with their names on. Just meant that, and this is amazing because these are Green Lanes has got amazing food, and they're really, helping to make this an incredible place with the stuff that they sell. But until you really celebrate that, people other than the people who live there wouldn't necessarily go there. So this helps to support the footfall. And another high street, again, this is where Chaucer's pilgrims kind of walked in the 12th century, from Canterbury to London. And it's a very old part of London, but it's also the area where Stephen Lawrence was killed. So it's got big challenges. And Eltham as a place, I think, has changed a lot. It was actually it was really an amazing project to work on because of the community consultation. I was a bit nervous that people would be, well, after the murder, one wonders what kind of people are living in a place like this. And I must admit, I was really impressed by the people there. They were really very caring of what should happen here in terms of improving the high street. And again, part of that was about making it possible to make the most. I'm just getting a cup of tea, thank you very much. To make the most of both sides of the street. So the crossing points were essential. People parked their cars everywhere. You have Eltham Palace down here. If you look Eltham Palace up, it's got this incredible, it's where Henry VIII's house was, but also there was a 1930s Courtauld Institute, which you should look up online. It's amazing. It's got this circular room. It's Art Deco. It's very distinctive. And we thought of Henry VIII's, animals and the Art Deco carpet when we were looking at this scheme. And there's also Wellhall Pleasance over here. So it's got a lot going on, but it was very run down, very poor. And one thing we did was that we said, let's make a really big crossing that connects and makes this space happen. So this is in granite, in 2 tones of granite. This was previously just a access road, and now it's a market space. And one of the funny things here was that when we did this Daily Mail newspaper was criticising the scheme for having been idiotic because we'd painted the stripes the wrong way round. Because, when you have a pedestrian crossing, you do stripes this way. And they said, look at what the fools have gone and done here. They've only gone and done them the wrong way round. And that was quite pleasing because it's such a horrible newspaper that we felt that we must be doing the right thing to have angered them. In fact, this is a signalised crossing, and the pattern could be absolutely anything at all, which is interesting. So we wanted to really stop cars driving through here so quickly and make car drivers think, what am I supposed to do here? So they slow down. So that was the idea. And then the priority is on this, I would say, slightly deco feeling geometry and rhythm and texture and intention. And then on the sides of the streets, there are these street gardens, and we took away the railings and we made these areas where you park feel human, even with the car there. And there's a cycle lane. And then there's this 1940s, I don't have photos of it, but it's a very sweet 1940s arcade. We made a terrazzo mat that celebrated it. We made a big sign that said, you are now leaving. This is back going, if you like, heading back to Canterbury. This is where you get on the east edge out, heading towards the green part. But then little names again, as I showed you before. And then this sort of swirling deco carpet-like figure has these seats built in, which are following the pattern. And we had these famous names. There was like 30 famous people, including Kate Bush and Bob Hope and Henry VIII and all sorts of people, all of different ages. And we made these seats with Michael Marriott, who's a very nice designer. And a little lich gate wall, which we put here with carved stone. So it's about civic pride, and it's about the bits when you, so in the world of determinacy, words are very interesting because they are unambiguous and they are, in a way, clearly saying, this is where you are. Here's the name of the place. And I think we came to enjoy names very much because there's a kind of clarity to it, but there's, in a way, it's so clear that everything else is set into some degree of openness and unclarity to some extent. And I'm kind of very interested, we became very interested in traffic signs. So for example, in this image, you can see arrows and a cycle and lines, and they're telling you what to do. Those are rules, you know, you've got to do that stuff. Whereas a sign asks you to see the name of the place, and then everyone's mind will have a different effect when they look at Eltham. And so by making the sign very monolithic and monumental, but place specific, that's the thing, then it makes you think about the place as a place specific response to this thing, but also as the name. You know, what does the name mean? And it's very, there's a long way to go for us to understand really how to engage with these situations. Not completely unconnected is this image where the planter that we made here brings this building back into play. Completely undervalued building, very lovely facade, I think. Even with the Halifax sign, it's not bad. And so by just saying that the horizontal matters on this planter, and you then find the slope there, which you might not notice otherwise, you start to make this building feel special at that point. So how are we doing for time, actually? So, oh yeah, we okay? Still okay, cool. West Croydon was not quite a high street, but a public space in a bus station in south of London, actually. So it's a city pretty much. It's a very interesting place. And our task was to design improved spaces for the station entrances, the tram, the bus, and the train. And you can see here what we did was we looked at where the public space was, and it was a bit like this. It's just like little bits. There wasn't really much public space to deal with. And we decided to put those together and make a scenography that said that the edges, these strips and edges, were of value to the place, and they could take on a degree of Croydonness. One of the things that we were told was that we had to use the standard palette of materials that the council had, and we thought that we could use two different tones of their standard palette. And then we thought, but what if they lay them wrongly as they maintain them? And then when we saw this image, Richard Wentworth's book, we thought, well, actually, that's quite nice. We could anticipate mistakes. So this view of Croydon here, we named Croydon Circus. So this image shows you the idea that you would take on the civic intention. And we didn't do this lion, but it was very nice, the idea of a lion on the top. A clock, the paving in the two colours, and then a bit of upgrade here. And then it's a Croydon Circus, and the circus is a nice word because it means something round, but it means something celebratory. And then these shop fronts, which are quite vulnerable, are very Croydon-like. We called that a kind of Croydonness. And we took on this sort of arched repetition, this particular kind of scale and proportion in the design intention. And here, this was one of the main strips where we were connecting down to the station. So you can see there's quite a narrow footway there. And so we widened the footway and we made this Croydon-like fence, planting it so plants grow up. It has different mesh gauges so that when you look up, it looks different to when you look through. You can see through at lower levels more easily. And there's a kind of civic scale to this. So you have a big bonsai and a bench and a big hoop top fence. So there's some interesting scale things going on here, and a clock. I think clocks are very nice things to have anywhere, because just the fact that someone's maintaining them makes you feel like the place is being cared for. This perch gives you a view down one of the 7 hills of Croydon. And this is where the mistakes are already kind of anticipated and built in. And again, the scenography, the edges, this little strip where the man is walking is the public realm. But if you use the rose window of the church and repeat it, then suddenly the public realm is much deeper. We've been working on a project in Hackney for 2 plots of housing, and the 2 plots are here. And where's my cursor gone? Yeah, actually it's gone. Yeah, it's not in this image. It's here. And it's not far from our office, and these are the 2 sites. So that's the one I showed you just there, and then this one here has some existing tall buildings. So it's an incredible series of big slab buildings which create these great big spaces between. And what we needed to do for Hackney Council was to look at new housing that could fit in with this urban structure and begin to make new relationships with the buildings around, and the garages, which have to go. They're kind of defunct, but the levels are changing everywhere. It's quite a complex site. You get these relationships between balconies, unused verges of grass, and areas where people park. And you can see the levels changing throughout the site. And this kind of quite scrappy sort of condition that is once again to do with these edges. You know, how do you make these? I mean, this is actually where people live, and this is their access here. And this is not necessarily bad. It's just that with a bin there and with the car parking here, it sort of feels uncared for. And so we kind of, you know, spoke with, we went on walking consultation tours and asked people what they thought. And I think one of the good things there is that, you know, children are really experts at play. They know what they're talking about. And so we like to engage with them. And we started making drawings that sort of showed how this site was edged and ringed. And we showed some other buildings. Henley Hale Brown did these. They're very nice buildings, actually. And we just thought about the fronts and backs, and we tried to make diagrams that showed how play happens here. Interestingly, you know, the main entrance is here, and this is the back. But because the back is so well overlooked, it feels like a good front. So there's a kind of strange productive ambiguity about this condition, which we were surprised at. So then you have this bookend building here and this kind of courtyard building here. And both of those buildings make spaces next to them. So here, we call it the atrium building, means that this space is defined, this street and this street is a play street. And then here, this bookend building, by getting rid of the garages, makes a sunken garden. And the so-called hidden homes are tucking themselves under this tower. So we're kind of locking ourselves into the site. Here, the bookend building, which will have these incredible, very shallow but very long flats in here. I think those would be great. Makes use of this sort of dugout condition once you remove the car park. The hidden homes here are like a screen. So this is a delicate ground floor compared to the strong horizontals here and over here as well. And then this is where the bookend building allows this sense of the kind of excavation to feel playful. The atrium building creates this space in front with an entrance to the courtyard. And you start to see how these create a kind of connections to all sides, and this is what I showed you with the bins and the walkway a bit earlier. So this becomes a playful yard as well. The atrium is oval, and we found that very interesting because what it does is it means that the units coming off of the atrium have this slight sense of being together. You don't have the corners of the courtyards, which are sometimes relegated to awkward, slightly dark or difficult to light areas. Everything shares the same aspect. So when you stand on one part of the walkway, you feel you're standing on all of it. And it also means that something interesting happens with the lobby spaces, which we've tried very hard to make large enough to be usable as a room. And the whole thing has this kind of slightly opening out quality. And we wanted to kind of make these flats work in the round in a way so that you could connect loops, connect rooms together. And, you know, this is really difficult to achieve in a very rules, I mean, you know, it's very hard to make good flats when there are so many constraints on the cost and the fire escape and the health and safety regulations. But I think something interesting has been happening with the sprinkler systems recently, whereby you can start to actually have fire safety opened up with the sprinkler arrangement that allows you to be a little bit freer, a few less doors sometimes. But at the moment, we're working in quite tough constraints. Just looking here at the play streets with the ground floor, we sort of looked at maybe, because everyone wants active overlooking, active frontage, but we thought maybe sometimes you don't need or you have an active frontage with the play and you've got overlooking from here. Whereas here you have less play if you have windows here and here. So that's why we made this a playful wall, albeit you can walk in here. And so the ground does something else that has to do with the public space around it. And the building above is to do with looking out and the regularity of the block. And we made the space sort of playful, so you can kind of feel that this is associated with the buildings. So I've got a couple more projects to show you, and I realize that I've been going for the hour. I'm quite happy to carry on if you're happy to carry on.
Yes, we are happy to carry on,
Yep.
please.
Okay, cool. I think this is a very interesting project because it's very diverse in its scope, and we've been working on it for about 10 years. And what it is it's the Kodak site in Harrow in northwest London, close to the Greenbelt. And one thing we've been doing early on is to set an area action plan, a policy guide for how this would be organised, this site. It used to have a paper factory on it, which has gone. And so there's new housing, community uses, and a green route that runs through it. And we said the green route has to be a big park, has to be a linear park. And it should connect to Headstone Manor over here and the road down here. So what we did is we set the scene for this urban structure to have this linear park running through it. The factory is here. You can see lots of metro land kind of housing around here, and I'll show a bit more of what that means in a minute. And on the site, you can see the sort of quality of the urban structure of the industrial buildings kind of crunching into each other, having to resolve this geometry caused by the railway that came through. And that creates a kind of fascinating, troubling potential for working into that urban grain. The chimney of the paper factory will stay, and we're designing a community building around that chimney. This is a view of the buildings before they were demolished. That's the chimney. That's pretty much the only thing that's still there. There's all new housing and the green space coming. And it was, so we're involved in the sense that we worked on the area action plan. We're also designing the community building. We're also designing the green space, some of the public realm and urban landscape, but we're also doing an art strategy, which is quite unusual for us because we're not, you know, artists, we're architects. And so we're collaborating with Michael Marriott, who's the artist who designed those seats with us and some other things. And he's really great. So the point I'm making really is that we are layering across the same site a whole range of different sorts of projects, which feels really lovely to do. It feels very like there's a kind of privileged situation we're in to be able to do all these different types of things, and housing projects as well. I'm showing this because it brought the spirit of the future when this train came through into Harrow. And that spirit of the future, I suppose, is what has been talked about for many years in these areas outside London. They called it Metroland in the 30s when the trains started going out from the city to the countryside, taking people to a place where there was green trees, open space, and yet they could still work in the city. So you would have town and country. And this Metroland was this sort of aspirational vision of the pleasure of relaxing after work. And that's what these places were imbued with. And we were asking ourselves, what can we say now about this future image? And we looked at making an urban strategy that could be considered as a flower garden in the middle of the green belt. We started to look at this bigger picture. The Kodak site is here. So these drawings were about this bigger strategy. Again, moments like you've seen before, connective moments where you start to pull your assets of the city in closer together. And then you start to sort of shape the way in which the buildings might connect. And importantly in this one, you begin to see there's a church, 2 churches, a mosque, civic centre, a cinema, the chimney, Headstone Manor. You start to kind of see patterns and collect things together. And I think urbanistically, that's always good to do, because it means you can give a capacity for social value that way. You can start to kind of make the most of your of what the city has to offer, not just because they're old, but because they have specific value. So these are just different ways of arranging that green space through there. And we made this little diagram here. I think there's a zoom in. So this was like arranging a series of characters around this green route. And this was kind of interesting because here you have volume housing, you know, there's tons of housing going in, but these felt like this could be a strategy of special events or, you know, little truffle-like moments. And so the plan starts to take shape a little bit more, where there's a building here which we designed that turns the corner. There's a school coming by someone, I don't know who. Here's the community centre. These buildings being done by architects we're working with. And we're kind of looking at the green space, and the art strategy overlays all of this. That's a view of a model that shows you these 3 elements: the public space, the chimney, and this housing. This housing is designed by some other architects. It's fairly blank and not very sophisticated in terms of its bulk and height. And we wanted to do something else here that was more open, turning the corner, connected to the public realm, allowing light, and I'll show you that in a second. We designed the public realm here to be very much about the space of the green space, feeling as if it's running through the buildings and around. And this sense of it kind of pouring into the spaces of the buildings. And importantly, when you have podiums, linking them with steps. So if you're 15 years old, you can kind of do loops, playful loops, and move around the site. And we even designed the roads to be playful as well, because they're very slow moving. Yeah, same thing. And the art strategy starts to locate this territory. And you can see here there's some kind of orange figures going on. I'll say a bit more about that in a second. Here's the image of the community centre. I think what's interesting is this building now takes on the form of a shed. It's an energy centre and a community centre. and it's in this ground which is like this kind of rough, almost like a patch in your jeans, you know. It's a kind of part of the industrial reused rubbly kind of landscape, surrounded by housing, and we will use this screen to project films onto. So you can see the kind of figure that it takes. I look forward to showing you this when it's on site. Here's the ground, but I'll have to show you when it's finished. This is Michael Marriott, and so with the art strategy, what we did is we remembered all of this stuff and the machines that used to be in here and the paraphernalia. I mean, it's a shame they didn't keep this stuff. I did ask them to keep it, but they just junked the lot. So what you've got to do is to kind of look at the future again, this point I was making about, you know, what's the aspiration. And we kind of looked at the Kodak sign. So I guess you would know about this Kodak, and the colours are very reminiscent of going on holiday in the 70s, let's say, or maybe any time. And these colours are kind of to do with feeling happy. And as Michael wrote, the warmest of yellows is also the colour of sunshine. And so there's a very kind of elemental idea about these colours. You know, it's the potential to grow, oxygen to be produced. And so we had a really kind of innocent, powerful, innocent idea about these colours being able to be used across the site. And in the words of Roy Ayers, everybody loves the sunshine, was the way that we put it to the client, and they were very happy with it. So we're going to make this chimney take on the Kodak colours. We're going to paint it. And then we want to extend this idea further into the landscape with these other pipes, other figures, as if this kind of language is coming back. And it's a kind of, it's in a way, it's a sort of language that anyone could understand, that in the sense that pipes could be a swing, it could be something you sit on, it could be something you move through. And so we're just at the beginning of this strategy. I'm showing it to you because we haven't really developed it yet, but it's a kind of an idea that's starting to unpack. Even yesterday, I realized that it would be very nice to make a bird bath out of it. We could have a little bird bath, you know, coming up, and then a bird feeder hanging down in the elderly people's home garden. So it's kind of, you can kind of do anything with a pipe, and you can play with the landscape. You can kind of interfere with its properness sometimes. So that's what we're looking to do. And then this kind of episodic quality, you know, the relationship between the energy center here and the housing I showed you. So here's the housing. I just wanted to show you that quickly. The setting of the public realm means that the podium up here is like a second front door. There's a gate that connects it. We took this idea as like a ball of clay, kind of, you know, shaped by hand. We made this model of it in raku to get the idea across. And then you have a little mix of houses, maisonettes here and flats. And then here's the gate. And the gate leads up here. And we wanted to connect the gate to the lobby, to the flat, to the balcony. So there's always a sense of where you're going. And there's a kind of two-level quality to the public realm in this way. And then the podium is like a little part of the landscape which pushes its way between the buildings, and you always get these views out. And we made these flats which give you always a double aspect. And we made windows which are the same size, but you always get a horizontal one and a vertical one in order to retain that sense of choice. And views out, therefore, are feeling like you're part of the flat when you're on this balcony. Okay, so I'm coming to the end. That not very much longer. I've got one, but maybe two projects. But just, you know, sound the horn when you're ready to finish. We've just finished this project, which I think is interesting, especially in the context of this sort of idea of determining use and remaining indeterminate, because this is an exploratory space. This is a space that's designed to be tested and to respond to people testing it. And it's a park in Brent Cross, which is North London. And it's essentially an existing parade. It's part of a very big housing estate. And it's a temporary space because it will move. And it's here. And you can see there's a construction hoarding around it. And the space around it will have kind of thousands of new homes coming. But what this means is that we put loads of trees in, loads of play spaces, and people use it. And it's like an incubator and a testing bed for what could happen later. So the trees will be reused and relocated. So will the play equipment, but other things might come out of it. So there's a kind of sense of exploration and literally play, in the sense that we are playing with the opportunities of this space to move out into the bigger landscape over the next sort of 10 years. And one of the interesting things is that we kind of overlaid, we deliberately made a grid that overlaid an existing green space, which was quite unsafe and underused. And in doing that, we sort of found places where we were thwarted in our intentions, kind of deliberately failed to make a complete grid. So there's already a sort of sense of the landscape fighting back, or at least having a dialogue. And we make this into 3 parts. There's a kind of parade here, parade of shops here. Here's the entrance. We reused the spire of an existing building there to make a special landmark. It welcomes you. You can play here on this hard landscape. There's a piece of green, and then there's the intensity of the kind of play. And so you kind of get this slightly surreal juxtaposition, this combining of elements in perspective is very enjoyable. This is a very ugly building, but somehow in this context it turns into something playful. There's the Brent Cross Shopping Centre, pretty impressive concrete box over there. Some mirrors. This is a construction hoarding, but we designed it to be like a colonnade with views through, but also views back at yourself. And it's quite quiet as well. It's got kind of space in it. So this is just, okay, last slides, but then I wanted to show you quickly one project after that, and then I promise I'll finish. So this isn't really a project. This is me trying to imagine London. And I did a very quick drawing to put together all the components. And it'd be very nice if you tried to do this with China or South Korea. Like, can you draw it in 5 minutes? This was my task. And so I thought I'd try and draw it like you have parks and you have railway arches and lakes and rivers and housing. And then I was thinking about how the buildings, when they come forward, often don't do much for the public realm. They bring little bits of public space with them, but they don't really take advantage of what the city is offering in their relationships. So my point here in the sketch was that good relationships get missed if you only think about your individual project. And then when you engage, when you think differently, and I think this might have to do with policy, like setting policy to expect each development to contribute to a broader territory of public space. By engaging the new with what's there, I think you can invigorate the city that exists, if you like. So I think there's a thing here, I suppose, which I'm saying, which is that much of what we have now should be valued in the sense that it is already useful, but may be enhanced rather than changed. And I think the simultaneity of time can place more emphasis on the quality of what we have now, not just what's coming in the future. And I wrote a piece actually in building design called "For the Time Being," which makes this point that in some way, looking to the future, we've sort of forgotten about the present. And so I think there's something creative about that. It's a very lovely territory to operate in as an architect. It's that thing of when you go walking, in a city, looking at a site, wondering what you think. That pleasure, I think, is essential and extremely important in terms of creative scene setting through dialogue and through drawing and through photography. And it's, I think it's sometimes undervalued because it's a bit like, oh God, I've got to find the solution and draw it up. But actually that bit is when you really can start to create value in your own mind as an architect, as an individual, as well as a collective situation. So I really am finishing with this one. I wanted to show you this one because it's a very funny project. And in a way, it's the freest non-briefed project I think I've ever worked on. And it was with Paul Ellerman, this artist in Rotterdam, and he asked me to get involved with this exhibition. And he was curating the exhibition. There were lots of artists getting involved, and he brought me in as a kind of an artist, even though I wasn't an artist. It was ambiguous what I was supposed to be, I suppose, which was nice. And he enjoyed this kind of idea of de flute and de hoy, which I think are terms of saying hello and goodbye, but they're also names of ships in Dutch. And so I'm, just have over the years had this dialogue with him in very strange ways. So this is me going on an ICA walk with him where we were talking about the invisible city, and we were being led by a police officer who was an expert in unmarked police cars. And I was talking about curbs. And honestly, it was such a lovely day. And it was so free because people were just talking about the city that they couldn't see. And so I kind of thought that maybe there was an idea about, because I'm, often talking about the public realm, I got slightly bored with myself and I was saying, let's call it no public realm. So first of all, no public realm, what does that mean? And then I was looking at this and thinking, well, what is that? Is this a public space? This is outside the gallery in Rotterdam. And what does the public realm mean when you have a building and a landscape put together? This is a student's drawing, and she made this lovely observation about a curb and the corner of the building sharing a material language. And I'd love to make a building like this, actually, where the two are just one thing. And then you're just looking around, that's what we did. I walked around with Paul and the gallery owner, and we were just looking at things like this, openly, without any judgment, no brief. What is it? What could it be? What do we think? And that to me is part of the pleasure of thinking, of seeing again, when you look without judgment, finding playful areas. This is Paul bouncing on some black rubber. And so here's the gallery space. And really what it was just what the gallery does. It does events. It kind of is a small gallery. And we were just looking at the spaces in the gallery, looking at the threshold inside and outside. And I think it was the inside and the outside that caught my attention. But this is at the back, looking into the play space. And this is at the front, where you have this lovely blue limestone sort of upstand. And in Paul's mind, this was kind of already an exhibition. It's just someone putting some rubbish into a shop next door. And he always surprises me with his ability to get straight to the point of art. It's almost that you, I don't know, I don't think I can explain this very well. I think you do. Anyway, yeah, I'm not even going to try. It's an interesting thing because it has to do with what the center of the project is about. And sometimes the project is about, it is about something that's more immediate than even one can imagine. It's so straightforward, you can't believe it's not even a representative of anything, it's just itself. And I think this straightforwardness and this clear looking is something that I found very attractive in what Paul was doing as an artist, what he does do. And so when you look at something like this, it's just what it is. It's some numbers, and there's a tree pit surround, and then there's a bear, and then and you begin to realize you're in this complete wonderland. It's unbelievable what you're looking at. All these mundane things together start to create a context. So I made this drawing, which was a drawing of the gallery. Here's the gallery, that's the street. Streets in Rotterdam are always made in the same way, the same concrete and clay. And then here's that funny play space with the bear, soft, friendly stuff. And so I saw that the gallery was really bridging these two spaces, and I thought it would be very nice to bring the street into the gallery, and then to make a little thing at the back that actually this was a kitchen thing, that one didn't happen. But I wanted to make a tree here at the front as well that would be inside. Yeah, and this is this gallery, balcony viewing platform. So we took some material, we borrowed some materials from a compound, brought them in, laid the stones, made a street inside, and nothing more than that really. But it was very nice to see how when you lay stuff outside, it's the same thing. You always have to cut or not cut or leave things open. Anyway, so it happened, and this lovely photo of the tree outside and the tree inside starts to kind of connect the public significance of the project, and it was very well used by artists in all sorts of ways after that. And they even made this thing at the back. It's not quite how I would have designed it, actually. It happened very lightly. Almost no money was passed, but it's very beautiful because, you know, they've got a DJ playing out there and children down here. And the kind of whole thing just felt, in a way, that's how urban projects should happen in a way. But when you're doing big developments, there should be this degree of inclusion and openness, and being open to what can have a bearing on it. And then all the materials got lifted up and then taken back to the place where the state store their materials. And it left me, this is the last slide, left me wondering, when you have places made of materials, is the place the materials, or are the materials representing the place? There's a kind of interesting, when you see them stacked like this, you're thinking, but those things were the place, but now they're stacked like that, they're not the place anymore, which I found quite beguiling. That's it. That's enough from me, I think. Seems I've run on by nearly half an hour. That's terrible timekeeping. I think you're muted, Minson.
No, that's fine. Completely fine. That was so enjoyable, joyful, and really feeling good lecture.
Thank you. Oh, you muted again.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Did you hear that? I said it was such a joyful, really feeling good lecture. It really made me happy, you know, everything. And it's really inspiring, really.
Thank you.
Encouraged me to think back of my works and, you know, like I should be more fun in my life, you know, make it more happy for everybody, for the public. I got a message from a person who was in this lecture earlier, but she had to leave. She left a message. She said she really enjoyed this lecture about your work. It feels that your thoughts are grounded into people's life and care for urban living in the realistic, also visionary way. She especially liked Eltham High Street project and Wood Street one. And she actually lives in North London, somewhere near Walthamstow. So I think she was really inspired. And
oh, great to hear that.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much. It was really lovely.
Enjoyed it.
Yes, I enjoyed it so much. I'll definitely share this video that we recorded today and share it with more people.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so
any
much
questions? Send them by an email. But otherwise, I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yes, hopefully we can invite you, way over to Seoul sometime.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Yes.
Well, good luck, everyone, and
good luck.
I hope it goes well.
Thank
Have a good
you.
rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.